The views and opinions in the following program are those of the host and guests and do not reflect those of Ernest Smith or Ernest Smith Productions. This is ESP TV.
Good evening. This is ESP TV. My name is Karen Bryson, and my guest this evening is a longtime friend, Bill Holmes. We met years ago with a writing group in Philadelphia and have remained close friends ever since. Good evening, Bill. How are you?
Good evening, Karen. It's good to see you again.
I'm telling you, I think the last time I saw you was right near the end of the summertime, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Or maybe
Absolutely.
in September, sometime like that.
I'm going to tell our listening audience a little bit about you so that they can catch up and hear the wonderful things that you've been doing, and then we'll get right into some questions, okay?
Sure.
Let me tell you about my friend, Bill Holmes. He has published a full-length poetry book entitled Straight from the Heart. He has a spoken word CD entitled The Air I Breathe. And his Essence best-selling fictional novel, One Love, has been flying off the bookshelves. So everyone, he's going to have to let you know how you can get a copy of your own. They make great stocking stuffers or coffee table, little books to just have questions about. Bill is the writer and director of 2 short films entitled The Program, and the other one is Butterflies. And as a poet, Bill has opened for such artists as The Last Poets, and they are an excellent group. If you have not heard them before, I first became familiar with them when I was about 13 years old in Jersey City, and had their first original album. He's also opened and given spoken word for the award-winning jazz musician Roy Ayers. That must have been exciting, so we'll have to ask about that as well. As a published poet, Bill has been featured in 50 Bold, the Philadelphia Inquirer, African Voices, and Essence, and anthologies in numerous books. He is the founder of the creative writing course, Right Here, Right Now, and he also taught for 5 years at Temple University. So we're going to get all the experience and knowledge and interesting facts about Bill that we can while we have him secured right here today. Let's start with my first question towards you, Bill. How old were you when you realized that writing was your passion?
Wow. A lot of people don't know this, but writing wasn't my original passion. It was actually
Okay.
painting and drawing.
Wow.
Just had a bad experience with an art teacher in the 9th grade.
Mhm.
But also, um, I would say, now that I'm thinking about it, I think for writing, for me, came around that time period, but maybe a little bit more, less, uh, when I started learning about short stories,
Mhm.
um, and discovered the Twilight Zone,
Oh, great show.
where, yes, absolutely. And I remember the one episode that was we read in school called Nightmare as a Child. And just that genre of like of changing the possibilities of like uh, the allure of like the short story kind of like
Mm-hmm.
created that buzz as far as like with when it came to the writing. Um, I played around with it for adolescent and early adulthood when my 20s, but I didn't
Okay.
take it seriously until after I had a bad breakup, and I just dove right into it, like as far as like was beginning to write poetry.
That's awesome. Do you remember your very first poem?
Ooh, I remember my very first published poem that occurred in the Philadelphia Tribune, and it was called
Okay.
Peace of Mind, and that occurred about 25 years ago.
So that must have been one of the best experiences, especially since that was the very first, like, oh, I'm published.
Yes, I was on cloud nine, and I was just like, this is the beginning of something. I don't know where it's going, but it just kind of created that desire to start writing.
Okay. So what was the motivation behind your book, One Love?
Um, One Love was like, that was my first fiction novel.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been doing poetry up until that point, maybe for like a couple of years. But I always knew that poetry was going to be a springboard to other things, as far as like with
Okay.
writing fiction or nonfiction. And I attended a book signing in the spring of 2001 by an author by the name of Marcus Major. And I
Okay.
was the only person that was intended that signing. And
Wow.
that was a great experience because you don't get the opportunity to have one-on-one with an author in that
Right.
type of setting. And we just vibed. He just left a powerful impression upon me, Karen, that made me say, I'm going to, write fiction. And I set out on a path to do that, as far as like with taking creative writing courses, learning how to write fiction, things that I had forgotten in high school and also junior high school, as far as like
Okay.
with plot, character, setting, themes.
Developing all that. Yes.
And I also joined a writing group and basically uh, educated myself on learning how to write fiction, as well as like not only just joining a writing group, but also participating in the Hurston Writers Week in the summer of, I want to say 2003 or 2004, one
Okay.
of those years. But it was just like a great experience to network with other authors and well, aspiring authors, but also to work with an established author as
Right.
well.
Absolutely. I remember earlier when I decided I wanted to write
Mhm.
on a larger scale and level. I went to one of the seminars by the author Karen Kionis. I think her last name was Miller. She wrote Satin
Mhm.
Dials. I'll never forget that. And at the time, I was writing poetry, and I had started on a novel. One was a romance novel, one was a children's book, and one was more um, suspense, let's put it that way. And the advice that she gave me was that I needed to pick one genre and not be so diverse. And I disagreed with her on the level that we can do so many things. We're not just mothers or fathers or we do so many things. We can do sports and everything else, but interact a whole multiple amount of things within our nucleus. So why would I need to be segregated to just one genre of writing? And she said, well, if you write children's books and you're writing something else, a romance novel of someone else on a higher level of age, that parents may have an issue with that. Oh, well, she writes romance novels and she's writing children's books too. I sort of can feel both sides of that. What are your thoughts on that?
I met Karen Miller, um, and I am on the same line of thinking as yourself, Karen, because I know some authors who write in one genre and they do so in another, sometimes using another pseudonym or
Right.
sometimes using their own name. One of my favorite writers, James Baldwin,
Mm,
he wrote across the board as far as like with both fiction and nonfiction.
right.
So I don't think you can limit yourself to different genres. Um, no, to limit yourself to one genre specifically, because I think
Hmm.
the opportunities are there. I mean, if I just limited myself to poetry, Bill Holmes, the fiction author, would not exist.
Yes, exactly. What is your motivation behind a lot of your poetry? Where is your inspiration? Where do you get that?
It comes from my personal experiences, and also being authentic, because
Okay.
I know that there are certain poets that they talk about their personal experiences or what they feel,
Hmm.
and I wanted to use my creativity as a vehicle to express some things that I was feeling. Uh,
Okay.
Peace of mind. The first poem that I ever wrote was dealing with frustrations at a job that I didn't care for. And it's just
Okay.
a matter of just having that peace of mind or that internal control of how you think and how you feel, despite that there might be storms raging
Hmm.
around us, there's calmness inside. You can't
Mm.
control what happens outside of you, but you can
Right.
control your response to those circumstances.
Absolutely. Yes. When you first began writing your poetry, let's start with there. Were you open to letting other people read it, or were you very guarded and wanted to keep it to yourself, or were you more open and said, okay, I'm open to whatever critiques or likes or dislikes you may have, because just like with art, you may see a picture and I may see it differently. That doesn't mean we don't like it. We just see it differently, and everyone doesn't like everything. So, were you guarded with your work, or were you more open with it?
Initially, I was very guarded
Okay.
and hated feedback, hated critiques.
Really? Why?
Um, um, it's probably because I'm a perfectionist by nature, and I've learned to eliminate that side of myself because it can't be one and done and it's over with. I think that limits me as an artist and also as
Right.
a creative. If just like not getting feedback, but also consider the source of the feedback because
Mm-hmm.
you can have, and I've been in groups or been around writers or poets who are about their own agenda and sometimes will try to sabotage you as far as like with their comments. Um,
Right.
so that's why I say you have to be very guarded, but also
Mm-hmm.
knowing who to trust your work with, because not everybody wants to be happy for you or wants to be see you successful.
Exactly. Exactly. How often do you do spoken word, and how did you get into that?
Um, I don't do it as much as I used to younger. Uh, I actually got into that, and that kind of like goes back to your first question, the previous question. I'm sorry. As far as like with sharing your work. Um, I share my work with my uh, best friend. She wasn't, well, she became my best friend and also became like a sister to me. And
Okay.
basically, I shared with her Peace of Mind and another poem that I had published in the Tribune. And she made the comment that, Bill, I can see you reciting your poetry in front of people. And I looked at her like she was crazy because I'm not saying sharing anything. And we were out at a restaurant in Philly called Warm Daddies,
Okay.
and they
Is
there
that
was a
still
sign
open?
there. Yes, Warm Daddies is that's still open. It's gone through so many changes in many different locations. They did close its doors temporarily, but I believe that it is still open. And there was a sign that's saying that there was open mic poetry on the third Monday of every month. And
Mm-hmm.
she just kind of repeated that. I was like, maybe I should give this a second thought. And then I just started going around poetry venues throughout the Philadelphia and South Jersey area. And then in the later years expanded into northern New Jersey and as well as New York.
Okay. So you were never really nervous standing before a group of people, giving them your soul basically through your artwork, your poetry. It was more that you were more guarded in the beginning to the reception you would probably would have received.
Oh, I was guarded and I was nervous. I remember my first time reciting a poem. It was felt like I'm being on a firing squad,
Oh my.
and because you're putting yourself out there, and you never know what
Yeah.
the audience is going to say about your words, or how they're going to receive it. And but over time, as I've kept doing it, and my confidence builded, and also learning to memorize my work, and
Mm-hmm.
also taking it seriously, and also like as far as like with not only just with the writing but the reciting. uh, I have like been up at midnight reciting one this trying to memorize and recite the same poem for an hour
Wow.
just to get it right for like maybe a 3 minute performance.
So what did you do? Stand in front of a mirror and just watch your facial expressions and how you the connotations and tone of what you were saying and the
Hmm.
timbre of your voice and everything. So just to see if it would be
Yes,
perfect.
the whole 9 yards. I mean, in front of the mirror,
Not even holding
as
a
far as like
hairbrush,
reading.
huh?
No, 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 no. And then also with body language as well, because you
Uh huh.
sometimes you can just be like start out robotic and stiff, but also
Right.
using hand gestures as well as like to help me memorize certain passages, like as far as um, if I was like reciting something about there are three things that I want to get in this particular verse, and then just
Mm-hmm.
be like point number one, point number two, point number three.
Did you ever have anything written down on your hand that you would just look down at real fast to make sure
No,
you remembered?
never that.
I remember you shared one of your poems with me well, it's been quite a while, but it was one of my favorites that I loved, and I don't remember the name of it, but you were there with a couple of the ladies that were also on that poem. Do you remember the one I'm talking about?
Yes, and it's actually the one that was converted into a movie, the program. My first,
Oh, that's it. Okay.
that is it.
I love that poem.
And that poem was actually based on an experience where I was engaged to someone,
Okay.
and I went through some similar situations that I discussed as far as like with dealing with in a relationship where someone was verbally and emotionally abusing me. But
Right.
the poem that you're talking about is one of, it goes to a level of domestic violence. And I had never put my hands on a woman. Um, I've never gone that route. And that poem was created as what if you lost it? And basically, it resulted into a piece about domestic violence that tells us a story from a perspective where the man is being the victim, and
Right.
also the fact that he was exposed to witnessing a domestic violence act where his father killed his mother, and then what type of
Okay.
psychological effect did it have upon him dealing with PTSD later on in years when he's involved in a relationship with where he's the victim.
What form is the program playing on so that people that may want to see it can at least view it?
The program is available on YouTube,
Hmm.
and if you would just put in the program Bill Holmes or the program Domestic Violence, you'll be able to access it.
It has been a long time coming where people of color would even discuss domestic violence because of either shame or whatever what other connotations may be behind that. But you've intimated to me that I can use some of your past in our interview today. Like, I know you've battled with depression and have since
Mhm.
become a counselor helping other people. How did that all begin for you?
I've had uh, dealing with mental health issues throughout my life, um, and it was left untreated, especially with dealing with um, my parents' separation and divorce, but also being exposed to certain situations in family that caused me to experience major depressive disorder and also suicidal ideation.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, some of my poems do touch upon that aspect of my life as far as like with depression, also the suicidal ideation. I have a poem called Clenched Fist, which deals with anger management. Um, there's a poem that I wrote called Survivor that was based on addiction, which is something I observed.
Okay.
And we are the sum of our experiences. Unfortunately, some of those experiences are bad ones, and they could either make us victims or victors.
Absolutely.
And and I try my best to not be a victim, but instead be a victor, and not
Right.
realizing that my writing poetry was a coping skill to help me
It was
manage my
therapeutic
thoughts.
for
And
you.
yes, thank you. That was good. That's a great word for it. Describe it.
The
And not only
poems that
was
you
it
just
therapy,
indicated are, I'm sorry,
go ahead.
I was going to ask you, the poems that you just indicated, are they in the air I breathe?
They're on the air I breathe, the CD. Well, actually, Survivor is. They're
Okay.
also in Straight from My Heart.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that is out of print. But however, uh, next year, 2022, is going to
Mm-hmm.
mark the 20th anniversary of when
Oh
I initially
my.
released that, self-published that, and I am contemplating to re-releasing that next year as far as like an anniversary issue, so that that will be available. Working on trying to have the air I breathe
Mm-hmm.
available on download because nowadays with poetry, a lot of they're not poets would put their work on CDs, but some are now making that transition onto the digital format. And
Right.
what better way to just having like my poetry that's available for someone to listen to on digital format.
That's amazing. Congratulations. I guess I'm still
Thank you.
old school. I'd rather hold the book in my hand. I want to feel the leather, a hardback book, or even the soft back. I want to be able to keep it. My whole house looks like a whole library. I have books everywhere.
Hmm.
Considering what you've been through, and you said that writing was therapeutic, and you went through the depression stage and all the other things that you had to get there, were none of your relatives aware that you were exhibiting these destructive behaviors and tried to lead you towards help? Because I know that people of color generally brush things like that under the rug. Oh, he's just a certain way. Oh, he'll be okay. Did you finally end up getting help on your own after you were a certain age, or were you at least guided that way while you were younger?
I got help on my own, but it took a former coworker and
Mm-hmm.
also who was a friend of my mother's, and
Okay.
not even realizing how deep with the depression I was in at the time because I had made a comment to her with everything that is going on. I'm ready to just commit suicide and just end my life. And then she brought it to
I'm
my
so glad you
attention what
didn't.
I just said. And that's when I knew that I need to get help.
It was time,
Earlier that
yes.
year, I participated in my jobs employee assistance program, or EAP as uh, the acronym is known. Uh, uh, Benefit to get limited mental health counseling, but I just never had a connection with that therapist who was there. And then I
Okay.
actually found one who basically I felt comfortable with sharing my work, or not my work, my thoughts and my feelings, and they would be able to
Right.
process that. But it wasn't until maybe months later when I finally admitted to her that I had suicidal ideation, and that was just a big catharsis as far as like with helping me manage my mental health and depression. And I'm not going to say that it totally um, cured me altogether because I'm a person who lives and is managing his mental health. And as far as like with depression, um, but that
Is it a
experience,
daily walk through to just feel a wholeness and a oneness?
some days are, and then some
Okay.
days are good, and then other days are not. Um, and it wasn't until later on this year that I revealed in an article that I wrote for 50 Bold, whereas that I did have a suicide attempt. That was
Right. I
about
read
8
that.
years ago. And that was the first time that I publicly came out and told people. They knew about the ideation, but not how serious it was. And even before the article came out, I only shared it with the information that what was going to come out with a handful of people. And basically, they um, were grateful that I'm still here, and that
Absolutely.
basically, um, you know, were gave me their support and encouragement through that period. And then just like um, they read it, and then it was the feedback that I got was great because it was encouraging that your loved ones don't look at you or perceive you in certain way because
Right.
as fortunately with
Yes.
in the black community uh, we have like what's it, the word
There's a
I'm
stigma
escaping
behind
as far
that.
stigmas, yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You are such a strong, learned man, and I have such a high regard and respect for you that I'm not just speaking for me, but I guess anyone else involved or in that same arena battling with that type of depression or inner self doubt or whatever. Um, it's hard to actually want someone else to know about that, but you felt safe enough finally, and not being in denial was the first step in trying to get assistance and help for you. When you give, when you're on speaking engagements or giving seminars or whatever, has your own testimony been the catalyst to help someone, and someone has come up to you and said, that really helped me because I was right on the brink or right on the edge, but what you said touched me to make me want to do something different or go in a different direction?
Absolutely. I Years ago, I was a storyteller. Participated in an organization called This Is My Brave. It's a nationwide uh, um, organization, nonprofit, where storytellers throughout the United States and also international share their
Okay.
stories with mental health. And I use that platform for poetry. And I've had people who approach me. I remember a young girl who was in her 20s, college student, and she basically reiterated some of the points that you just made, Karen.
Wow.
When I've done poetry uh, involving uh, my suicidal ideation, I would have
Hmm.
people that approach me like, "Are you okay? Do you need a hug or do you need help?" But the majority of people have echoed that same sentiment that you just expressed, like, "Thank you for sharing that. That I didn't have the strength to say what you said, and I think that I'm going to look into therapy."
Because of your own struggles, was that the motivation when you were in college to decide that I want to be a counselor, I want to be able to assist someone else so that they can get past this and realize that there is inspiration, there is encouragement, there is hope. That's the key thing. There is hope that things can change.
Um, I think that wasn't the case because I mentioned that I got mental health therapy with a counselor who I felt comfortable with, and her name was her, no, her name is Tanya Ladipo. She's
Okay.
founder of the Ladipo group. She no longer practices, but the impression that Tanya had on me made me want to go back and get my master's degree in mental health counseling after I got laid off from a job that ironically contributed towards my depression.
Wow.
And sometimes that's another thing that we don't talk about is like workplace situations where
Right.
they uh, contribute towards our depression. And as far as like with being in a job that you hate, or you feel like you're trapped in a situation because
Yes.
other jobs are not hiring, you're doing something you don't love, and what is it? You have to deal with an employer that doesn't like you, the politics within the workplace. All that can contribute towards someone experiencing stress, depression, anxiety.
Yes.
Uh, there were many days where I would just get on public transportation and head to work, and I would just be like doing my best trying not to have a panic attack before I walked into the door,
My
and just like
goodness.
listening on what is it? I remember one song in particular, Sade's "Long Hard Road," and that was like my light in the tunnel from a musical perspective to help me uh, deal with my feelings like that. This may what we're going through right now may be temporary, but there's going to be a solution at the end of this.
Right, absolutely. Do you feel that once you became a mental health counselor, that you were instrumental in saving maybe somebody's life and actually being the catalyst to say, okay, I'm doing well here. This is where I need to be?
Um, I don't know if I've saved anybody's life, but I've made a positive impression
And
because
that's a start.
you're seeing for the first time a black man and also a person of color who is a male
Right.
who is the same age as several clients, but also saying the same gender as well
Okay.
as race. So that could be very influential as far as like with someone being inspired to get their mental health issues together and being open to going to therapy. And not only just like going to therapy, but applying what you're learning
Right.
and outside of the therapy, because that's where the real work begins. It,
Mm-hmm.
it's one thing that you attend therapy, but if you don't take what's being applied and using it to work on yourself when you're not in a therapeutic session, whereas, okay, if I'm struggling with work and I'm dealing with a boss that's a complete jerk and this is making me
Mm-hmm.
feel depressed, how do I deal with that situation?
Okay. Do you feel that minorities or people of color will be more adverse to speaking to someone that looks like them as opposed to going to someone that doesn't have the same background or culture, similarities, and things like that?
Hmm. I think that that does play into factor. I will admit this that that played into factor with me when I initially got mental health treatment, and I did not
Mm-hmm.
connect with my counselor through the EAP program.
Okay.
So there were certain things that I didn't feel comfortable sharing, and then also um, not only just with um, race and gender, but also age.
Okay.
Because I remember when I was doing group therapy and a person whose gender and race was completely different from mine, but
Mm-hmm.
we were in the same age group. And she basically said, I learned more from you because you're actually teaching me something as opposed to
Wow.
like a 20 something year old who is just reading from a piece of paper.
Right. Do you feel that your poetry has evolved now that you have become stronger and can identify some of the things that are triggers for your depression or anxiety or anything else? Has your poetry evolved in another level than when you were writing before and it was so in depth before?
Oh, absolutely. Not only just with the poetry, but just with the essays and also fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely seen a growth in the words that I write.
Okay.
It's more well thought out. Actually, I was thinking about this the other day because with that, I've always had like, okay, this is how it's going to begin, this is how it's going to end. I'll just let my imagination fill in the middle. And that approach doesn't work for me anymore. So it has to, um, I involve with changes as far as like thinking things out, being open, killing the perfectionist as far as like letting go of the everything has to be right the first time. Um, but really just having that love for the writing is still there that it was
Right.
25 years ago, and just really cultivating it, but also being open to exploring different ways to express that creativity,
Hmm.
if that answers your question.
It does. It really does. Is there going to be a sequel to One Love?
Absolutely. The sequel to One Love is coming out in 2022.
All
It
right.
is
See, you
it
were
is
holding this little nugget
tentatively
back. You
titled.
weren't going to share this with us.
No, I was going to get to it. Um, it's called I Can't Tell You Why, and
Ah,
basically
okay.
it picks up a few more months after the events of One Love, and uh, I'm very proud of it. I actually wrote it
Okay.
during the pandemic in 2020, most of it, and basically with the what I just described to you, I knew how One Love was going to begin, and I knew how it was going to end.
You
And
just
like I
had to
said, I
get the
let my
middle.
imagination fill in the middle.
The
But
meat.
however, this time around, I was more, I had a little bit more seasoning under my belt
Okay.
uh, to, to list out as far as like with working with outlines. I'm also picking up some things as far as like with writing each chapter, summarizing it in 3 paragraphs because it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then just like expanding upon a 3 paragraph summary into what is it, an individual chapter.
Okay.
And I'm very proud of the work. It's actually, and it's just in my opinion, it's a much stronger uh, novel, and it's a more
Okay.
worthy sequel to One Love. Before
That
that
is
comes
awesome. I
out,
can't wait to see it.
thank you. Actually, my publisher and I, we are going to re-release um, 2 short stories involving the 2 main characters uh, in ebook format, and
Oh,
it kind of
wow.
gives like a bridge between One Love and I Can't Tell You Well Why,
Okay.
and basically it kind of gives like a little bit of like the backstory of what you can expect to for I Can't Tell You Why,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a challenge in itself because it's easy. It was easier for me to write a novel than it was a
Okay.
short story.
Because you have to condense it and get
So
more in at that point.
yes,
Yes.
so
Wow,
that's coming
that's
out, and then
exciting.
actually I am working on uh, the the manuscript for the novel that will be proceeding. Or no, not proceeding, but will come after. I can't tell
Right.
you what.
Okay. Your 2 movies. Did you have anyone to mentor you maybe through the first process with the first one, or you pretty much um, saw how it was in the venue where anyone else was doing it, and this is how you decided to do it? Did you have a mentor to help you at all?
Yes, I had a mentor. I was able to get both films made, participating in with Five Shorts program. I'm sorry, Five Shorts project
Okay.
filmmaking program, and it basically was working with uh, talented producer, independent filmmaker Shamika Sawyer out of Philadelphia, and going over the
Okay.
basics of learning how to create a film, learning the backstory as far as like with pre-production, production, and post-production. What are the things that go into that? And also learning how to write a script, because the program was a poem that I converted into a short 5-minute film. And also
Okay.
Butterflies, which is the film adaptation of One Love. And that was 15 minutes at length. So not everything is going to go into the movie. So it's just
Okay.
enough as an excerpt that you can get to know these characters. And it was an interesting process to see, like, uh, to sh to shoot and also to write, and what is the process that goes into filmmaking.
Absolutely. Seeing the depths and everything that you had to go through and what's entitled in making a short film, do you think you'll venture out and make a full length feature film at some point?
Someday, someday.
Say that's
But
on
I'm
the
not going to say
it's
never
that's
say
on your wish
never.
list, huh? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some things that are going on right now. My focus for next year, 2022, is going to be I Can't Tell You Why, and then also with
Okay.
other literary bodies of work, because there has been a gap of, oh my God, almost 15 years since the two novels uh, were written. But however, unfortunately, depression interfered with the creative process. And even when I attempted to write the novel,
Right.
I didn't like the characters. I'm
Oh,
like, oh, these people are depressed. And it was a reflection of
but you
what I was
created
going
them.
through. I know, I know, but I just don't like these people. Or like,
Oh
what are they
my.
going? These people are too depressed. I don't want to hang out with them. And it wasn't until like I got myself together that it was able to let the body of work uh, speak for itself. I know that
Okay.
doesn't sound right or make any sense, but
It
once
does.
I started feeling good, then that started reflecting in my writing as well.
But sometimes, even if you were in a depressed state, if it were good for the storyline or a developmental phase of which maybe one of the characters, you didn't want to even just leave it there because people want to, when you're reading something, you want to be able to feel what the character's feeling and have it
Mhm.
take you somewhere else. And to me, that draws me in. If I pick up a book and read the first page, and it doesn't have to give me everything there, but if it draws me in to want to read more or want to know more what's going to happen, then I know I'm going to read the rest of it. I don't want to get through half the book and say, okay, maybe it's going to get better the more I read, the more I read, and it doesn't. So you have a lot of depth
Um,
and a lot of character and a whole lot of everything that you can mix in with your characters. And I'm so proud of everything you've done. That's why we've been friends for
Thank
so
you.
long.
Thank you, Karen.
And the fact that
I
we know
will
each other's
admit,
secrets,
true,
which will
true.
always stay secrets.
Yes, exactly. You caught me on that one.
Ah. Is there anything that you would tell your younger self that you know about you now to help you get through some of the journey that took you this much longer to get here? Is there something you would have told yourself that would have aided the process a little faster?
God, that's a question, and I've seen these type of questions in journal prompts and writing them, and I don't like those type of questions because I can't tell my younger self anything. However, if I did, I would have told my younger self to be more creative, stick with the writing, and just focus on the craft.
Okay.
I
That makes
actually wrote a
sense.
poem about that, as far as like with that, because it was called 10, and it's actually one of my favorite poems, and it's very personal as far as like with um, addressing what would you say to your 10-year-old self. And as I mentioned before, you can't go back and change the past,
Nope.
but looking at the positives of what happened, I really thank my 10-year-old self for his resiliency of going through what he went through. Because without that, and then not only just with the 10-year-old self, but also within adolescence and early adulthood, Bill Holmes, the 51-year-old writer, would not be sitting here today.
Well, I saw all that strength and resilience in you when I met you because whatever you were going through, you still had the desire, the want, the gutsput to want to push through. And if you didn't have that within you, you're right, you wouldn't be here now. But you're so much stronger than you believe you are. You have so much to give and have so much talent and creativity. I've always seen that in you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there something you would like to tell our viewing audience about you that you would want them to know as far as your career or anything?
Um, as far as like with Bill Holmes, I thank you for listening or to hear what I have to say. That means a lot to me because you just never know what somebody uh, when you say things or you put something out there, you don't know how people are going to receive it. Um, but I will say this: that with all that I have accomplished, uh, the best is yet to come,
Oh, I
and
like that.
definitely uh, because even right now, I'm discovering that I have yet to discover and produce my best work and to share that with the world, and that is something that I want to do. Because now it's about as far as like with when it comes to my creativity, looking at legacy as far as like with building where this body of work that I'm doing to expressing my thoughts and my feelings uh, to leave it behind as a world when I'm no longer where I made my transition as far as like
Yes.
with that making that as my leaving that as my legacy as far as like they represent who I was and who what my thoughts and my feelings were at this time, and also the experiences that I shared. Because I noticed that with uh, things that I may be going through, that other people have gone through in the past, and
Yes.
then you never know what somebody might be going through in the future, and they might be in need to pick up uh, a poem by me or by someone else that could touch their hearts and makes them feel that it's okay not to be okay, but at the same
You're
time,
true. That's so
I
true.
have the ability to resilient and to overcome this.
If someone wanted to have your expertise as a performer, as an artist, as a poet on their show or on their tour or whatever, how would they contact you?
Um, I'm in the process of developing my website, um, but I am accessible on social media.
Okay.
Bill Holmes 327. That is on Instagram as well as Twitter. I'm on Facebook as well as LinkedIn, and I do write articles on Medium. So if you look up Bill Holmes, uh, you will be able to find me.
I hope you all were taking notes and wrote that down. He is a phenomenal poet. His books are excellent. His movies, even though they're shorts, they're a must-see. So I'm hoping you'll go on all the mediums and look for Bill Holmes. It's been a wonderful experience. I really appreciate you spending your time with us this evening. Bill, and I'm sure
Thank
you
you,
and I will
Karen.
talk again real soon.
Mhm.
This has been ESP TV. My name is Karen Bryson, and as always, be a blessing to at least one other person each day. Merry Christmas. Have a safe holiday. Good night.